We usually credit the idea of a government bound by law to the Enlightenment, to thinkers like Locke and Montesquieu, writing in the 17th and 18th centuries. The principle that even the person at the very top still answers to something above himself can feel like a modern invention. But the idea is great deal older than that, and the real puzzle is how it survived the long stretch of centuries in between. The question I want to work through is where the idea that the law sits above the ruler actually started, and what carried it all the way to us. Start with what a constitution is actually for, stripped of all the legal language. A constitution is meant to settle where power sits and what is allowed to limit it. Underneath both of those, it has to answer a harder question, which is who steps in to enforce the limits when the ruler decides the rules no longer apply to him. Ancient Israel produced what one leading scholar calls the oldest attempt on record to answer that question through law, instead through force. The law sat above every ruler, the king included, and no single office could rewrite it or vote itself extra powers. The whole arrangement assumed the law had already been accepted by the community before anyone ever needed to enforce it. If you want a plain picture of it, think of the rules of the game that exist before any of the players show up. No player gets to change those rules in the middle of the match to hand himself an advantage. And if someone tries it, everybody else already knows what the rules say. That is the kind of thing ancient Israel built, except the rules in question covered an entire kingdom, and the player barred from rewriting them was the king. So, what did those rules actually say? They're set out in Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Hebrew Bible. The 17th chapter lays down what gets called the law of the king. The king has to come from among his own people, and he is barred from building up a large army or piling up personal wealth. On top of those limits, there is one more requirement that is easy to read straight past, but turns out to matter more than all of it. King has to write out his own copy of the law and read them every single day. Reason is that he never begins to think of himself as standing above the people he governs. That daily reading was a piece of structural design. It tied the ruler to a standard that sat completely outside his own judgment, and it made him face that standard again and again before he could quietly talk himself out of it. But was any of this really different from the other legal codes of the ancient world? The comparison people always reach for is Hammurabi's code. And it is the right one to reach for, because from a distance, the two look like cousins. Both are ancient, Near Eastern legal codes, and both go into real detail covering property, personal injustices, death, family obligations, and a good deal more. The two codes part company on a single point, which is where each one says the law comes from. In Hammurabi's code, the prologue puts the king himself at the source. Hammurabi presents himself as the one who God chose to hand down justice, so the law runs downward, from king out to everyone underneath him. The biblical framework reverses the direction completely, with the law reaching the king from outside, binding him from there. So what happens to a kingdom when its king ignores all of this? And again, ancient Israel ran exactly that experiment. And the most detailed case on record is its single most capable ruler. Solomon is remembered as the high point of Israelite monarchy, the wise and powerful king. By the 11th chapter of the first book of Kings, he has done every single thing the law of the king forbids. He piled up enormous personal wealth and took a vast number of wives and concubines. And the account is blunt about what came next. What the text traces is worth slowing down, because it goes deeper than one powerful man makes a few bad calls. It follows a sequence, one small compromise after another, until the original limit had been quietly hollowed out from the inside. And the damage did not stop with Solomon. After he died, the kingdom split, with 10 of the 12 tribes breaking away, and the unified state he had governed simply came apart. So did any king actually manage to stay inside those limits? Well, at least one. Josiah ruled the kingdom of Judah in the late 7th century BC. According to the second book of Kings, a copy of the law was rediscovered in the temple during his reign, and it was read aloud to him. His response was immediate and political. He cleared out the foreign religious practices that crept in and pulled the worship back to a single center. What the account shows is a king treating the law as a binding limit on his own power, a text he has to live under, including the parts that constrain him. So the framework existed in ancient Israel. The harder question is how it ever reached us today, because plenty of good ideas from the ancient world completely vanished. This one did not. And the reason it survived runs straight through Christianity. The main root is the Christian political theology. Start with Paul. In his letters to Romans, written in the first century, he states plainly that governing authorities get their legitimacy from a source above themselves, and that they answer to it. That is the same logic underlying Deuteronomy 17, now carried into the Roman world. Then comes Augustine in the 4th and 5th centuries, who pushes it further, arguing that earthly rulers hold their authority on trust rather than by right, and that power used outside its proper limits loses its claim on everyone's obedience. By the medieval period, that argument has hardened into a foundation of canon law, and it becomes the basis on which popes openly challenge the political authority of kings. Then Thomas Aquinas, in the 13th century, pulls the whole thing into a complete system. Human law, he argues, given its binding force from the natural law and natural in turn from divine law, which no ruler is able to override. The constitutional logic that started in Deuteronomy has, by this point, been built right into the intellectual architecture of Western Christendom. Now, I want to put the obvious objection on the table because it is a fair one. Someone watching this could reasonably say that I am reading a modern idea back into old religious texts, and that whatever the theologians wrote, it was the Enlightenment that actually built constitutional government and stripped the religion out of it. That is a serious objection, and it deserves a straight answer. Here is what is usually left out. When Reformation thinkers in the 17th century argued that a ruler who broke God's law could be lawfully resisted, they were reaching back to the argument that already had a 1,000-year history behind it. They were drawing directly on the Augustinian and Thomistic tradition. The Scottish National Covenant of 1638, which declared flatly that king was bound by the law and accountable to it, came half a century before Locke wrote a word. And it took its reasoning from exactly that tradition. So by the time famous Enlightenment names arrive, the idea that a ruler stands under the law had already been in continuous circulation for 2,000 years, handed down through Christian theology, working underneath philosophy that now gets the credit for it. So, has the problem actually been solved? The same failure mode keeps showing up, including in our own institutions. After all, look at what happened in Britain. Parliament gradually claimed sovereignty for itself and removed the monarch as a check on its own power. The intention behind that was reasonable, even admirable, because the aim was to stop the concentrated authority from ever sitting above the law again. But watch what it produced in practice. A parliamentary majority can rewrite its own rules and widen its own powers whenever it has the votes, and there is no longer an outside body with the standing to stop it. Constraining the crown simply relocated the problem of the unchecked power, moving it into the very institution that had done the constraining. Now, before I finish, a quick word on how this channel works. This is a monarchist channel, and it makes that case openly. The argument here is that monarchy has been a serious source of stability and legitimacy, and that its loss has often cost more than people expected. If you think this perspective is worth defending, the simplest way to help is to subscribe, so the argument reaches more people who are open to it. And if you want to back it directly, YouTube membership and the Patreon community are both open. Whichever way you choose to help, it counts, and it keeps this thing going. So let me come back to the question I started with. Where did the idea of a government bound by law actually come from? And what carried it to us? The oldest clear form of it was a religious and legal framework of ancient Israel, where the law was placed above the king and no office was allowed to rewrite it for itself. And the thing that carried that idea across more than thousands of years of medieval and Reformation argument into the modern constitutional debates was Christian political theology, working quietly underneath the Enlightenment names that now get all the credit. What stays open is the harder question underneath all of this. The biblical framework spotted the weakness early, that any institution left to govern its own limits will eventually govern them away. Whether the modern institutions that replace the crown have actually fixed that weakness or only relocated it is the part I would keep watching. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.